Ohuhu sent me this box with the art and color markers so I can test and review them. And in this video we're gonna color this sketch to test them out. There is a link in the description for a free coloring page of this drawing in case you want to color along with me. I'm most curious about the art markers because I've never worked with this type of markers before, so we're gonna start with those. The markers come in this case and it also includes cards to make color swatches, instructions and a pad that you can put between the sheets of paper to prevent bleeding through, which you should definitely use when you work in the sketchbook. First I make swatches of all the colors because that's what these cards are for, and then we can see how the colors will dry. Ohuhu also included this marker paper that is more suitable for markers than my regular sketchbook, so we're gonna trace the sketch to that paper and then it's time to start the fun. I'm gonna start with the Salmon Pink IR4 and I will put a list of the markers that I used in the description of the video if you want to draw along with me. I like working with the brush tip, but the marker also has like a chisel tip that you can use for larger areas, but for now I'm gonna use the brush tip because that is what I like working with. I need to figure out a bit how I can hold them. I do work in the direction of the membrane and I overlap each stroke. As you can see, I'm not entirely between the lines here, but I'm not too worried about that. And I'm gonna blend with this one. Don't forget I'm using these for the first time and I actually want to see if this would be something for beginners. I mean, if I can do it, you can do it too. Like I overlap each stroke again and that will create a more even texture. And at the end of a drawing, we can always go in with a pen and create some black line art instead of the pencil lines. And then we can adjust where we went a little bit over the lines. But the ink flow is really nice. It does give, it's not dry. And then I'm going in with a even more darker color, and that's the Marigold IR2. And I already noticed when I was experimenting with the markers that they dry lighter than when you put them down. And then I go back to the rose beige. I do want a brush tip for that. Personally, I prefer working with the brush tip for blending. Because the inflow, it gives a lot of ink and that way you can work really fast, but it does require a little bit of getting used to. I'm not sure if I'm making any sense. If anything is unclear, please ask in the comments as always. Then I go back to the Salmon Pink for the lightest color. And that's one part of the wing done, and I actually really like how the gradient is going. What I did notice when blending these markers, it works best when you have colors that are close together on the color wheel. And it's interesting that how much lighter the colors become when they dry. So that will leave room to go back into colors when they dry and darken them up when needed. It is important to keep in mind that you cannot go lighter. You can go darker with these, but going lighter is going to be a problem. My first impression is that this paper works really well with the markers. because it's very smooth and it's not tearing or anything. Usually when I work with markers in my sketchbook, it kind of ruins the paper. But that's not what's happening here. And I'm gonna color in this entire section with Salmon Pink. And then I'm gonna see if it needs anything else. I'm gonna start with the Barium Yellow for the fingers, because it will give a nice contrast with the membrane once it's dry. And because the paper holds the layers very well, and I start with a light color, I can go in with a darker color to darken areas to create shadows. But we're not going to use just that color. I'm also going in with the Marigold. To create a little bit of shadow. And we're immediately gonna blend that out as much as we can. So it's time to start coloring the body. And it's going to be a bit yellowish with green tones. And I will also let the orange and salmon tones come back that we used in the wings. And I started with the lightest color that I'm using, it's the Barium Yellow. Some areas I do not blend because I want them to be like more harsh shadows. And for the decorations, I'm going to use the Absinthe. I'm going to work on a rock, and that is actually the part that I'm most nervous about. And I am gonna put a bit of tape around the edges, because I don't want the color to go entirely to the edge of the paper. And I don't know if this technique will also work with this paper, but we're gonna see if the marker would seep through or seep under it. For the rock, I'm gonna use the dark yellow, the potato brown, and the raw umber. And again, I start with colors that are very close together on a color wheel, and I'm going to blend from the lightest towards the darkest. And with this one, I don't think I want to blend that neat, because I think that this that the rock texture it's not very even. It's okay that it has a little bit of texture. I'm gonna use the chisel tip, And with the chisel tip I overlap each stroke with the other one. And then I'm going to move to the potato brown. And first I'm going around the edge of the tail. With the tail is a bit tricky part. And for the blending I'm gonna use the brush pen tip. The rock, like I said, we don't need to be too worried about it not blending very well, because it will give some texture. I'm going back to the dark yellow, and I'm gonna blend that with the potato brown. And at the end of a drawing we're gonna use a fine liner to darken the outline and the line art of the drawing. So I think the chisel tip is really nice for very large areas, but I do find that I prefer the brush pen, even for the details. Because the rock has some shadows, we're gonna add a bit of the raw umber here and there. And I'm going to use the potato brown to connect with the dark yellow. And then we're gonna blend the dark yellow down. I'm gonna put some hints of the dark yellow here and there. We do need a little bit of shadow under the feet, and I am gonna use the raw umber for that. So I hope I won't ruin it. I'm gonna see if I can blend it out just a little bit with the blender to make the edge a little bit softer. This is where I actually want the muddiness to show. And keep in mind that the rock doesn't need to have too much detail. Because that is not where we want to draw the attention to. We want the attention to go to the wyvern. Well, I had some crazy idea. I don't know if the markers are supposed to work that way, because I was thinking about using the same marker for the moon as I used in the wing for the Salmon Pink. But I want it to be really light. And I already noticed if I want to have an even layer of the marker, I need to do several layers. and that way it will automatically become darker like this. But I want to create like a pastel light, so I have been experimenting, and I'm gonna use the blender first, and then I'm going to put the salmon pink on top of the blender. And when that dries, it should dry lighter and more even than it would have been just one layer of the salmon. So we're just gonna see if it's gonna work, how it's gonna work, and I might ruin the piece in this process, but yeah, then we learn something, right? I'm going to use the chisel tip for this. And what you see that the paper darkens, and that is actually because it's wet. And it doesn't have to be too even because, well, the moon, it has some craters and such. I'm not going to draw it realistically. But for me, I want to have it lighter than the wings, so that's our goal. So we're gonna overlap each stroke just by a little bit, but and then I'm gonna use the blender again to smoothen that out. I'm gonna dry with the brush pen. And well, what's actually fun about this piece and about this video, it's just one big experiment. It's just really to test the markers, to test the paper. And I really feel like I'm pushing the paper to the max here. And then we're just gonna see how that dries. It looks very gray right now, but I have faith. And I'm doing this in sections because I want the blender to be to still be wet before I go in with the salmon pink. I must admit that it is really challenging to create an even light layer of one color. And I'm going to see if I can blend it a little bit more here by making some ovals. And this part was already dry, but I just want to see what the effect is if I'm going back in areas that I've already done. I'm just going to let that dry and see how that's going to work out. So I'm not too happy about how the moon dried up, but I think that's just me. That's not the markers because I'm not too experienced with that. I did make a square on a test sheet and then it became very even. But I think when I need to go like in all kinds of directions for a larger area, that I need to figure out a way how to get my strokes even. Now I'm gonna use the Terra Cotta and I'm gonna make an outline around the moon so it stands out a bit more. And I'm gonna use the brush tip with that. I might add a fine liner to it as well. The thing is with these markers is you have, with the brush pen, you have to use it like really light because the ink will immediately starts to flow. And that's just practice, I think. And the last thing that I'm gonna do is I'm going to create a bit more outline with the micron markers. And this wyvern is all done, and now it's time for the end conclusion about these markers. I really had a lot of fun working with them, and I'm quite happy with the ink flow. When you put the marker down on the paper, the ink immediately comes out. It's very smooth to work with, and it also works really nice together with this paper. And I'm gonna see if I had some bleeding under the tape. Well, it did bleed a little bit under the tape, but that is also the combination of the tape and the paper. And I'm gonna see if it bled through the back. Well, as you can see, the paper is entirely clean on the other side, so I don't have any marker residue on my desk. So I'm happy about that. But because the ink flows really easily out of the pen, when you work with the brush tip, for example, and you want to work on smaller details, you really have to be very careful that you work fast enough to not overdo it. And that is something that I really need to practice on, because it was my first time with alcohol markers. I'm not familiar with them. They require a lot of control, but I still think they are very suitable for beginners. I really love the colors. I must say that the colors, when you put them down on the paper, they look a lot darker than they eventually will be when they dry. So that is something to keep in mind. The colors, they are accurate, and I do recommend to make these swatches so you can see what the colors look like. But keep in mind, when you use several layers, obviously it's going to be a lot darker. But the trick with by putting down the blender first and then putting the marker on top, that does work, but as you can see in the moon here, it requires some practice to make that smooth. And that was it for this video. I want to thank Ohuhu for gifting me these markers so I could experiment with them. And they also gave me a 10% discount for the people who follow me, so I put that in the description below. I want to clarify that I did not get paid for this video, but I did get the markers and also the water-based markers, so it was a gifting collaboration, which I was actually very happy about, because I never worked with alcohol markers before, and now I have, and I'm excited to experiment more with them, because I do think I need a bit of practice with them. So yes, I thank you for watching, and I would say like and subscribe, and I'll see you with the next one. Bye!